Hey, John.
Hey, Eric. I'm not going to ask you how you're doing tonight, because that would be bad.
Right.
That
You
would.
just ruined it.
We need to break our
I was
trend.
looking forward to it. And right when I had a snarky answer to that, too.
I intercepted. Hey, you're not alone in the room.
No, we have Carl back with us.
Hello, chaps.
Hey, Carl. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, anytime.
Why is Carl back? Aside from the fact that now instead of you being in Santa Clara, I'm in Santa Clara and roped him into coming.
Yeah, it's what is it? Ring around the developers or musical developer chairs. So evidently Carl has to come online anytime there's a critical CPU vulnerability.
Apparently, yeah.
I think that's the deal. So it was Intel, Meltdown, Spectre, that kind of stuff. Now it's AMD. Talk about that in a little bit.
I was gonna bust into a Seinfeld. So what's the deal with AMD?
Well, let's save that for a little bit. Everything okay this week? What you're down in Santa Clara?
Yeah, no, I actually am here because I was invited to do a presentation on blockchain for the Bay Area CSO Council. So looking forward to that.
Tomorrow morning.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Hey, I do have one bit of follow-up, although since we sort of did follow-up last week on this thing with the Memcached, this is follow-up to follow-up, so follow-up squared.
Follow-up inception.
Right. Remember last week you mentioned that there was the mem crash that posted GitHub that used Showdown to find servers, turn around, and execute the reflection attack. The thing that I saw this last week was early in the week, so maybe just after we recorded last week. But there's a kill switch that you can do if your Memcached server is exposed. You can basically send it a shut down or flush all packet, which does exactly what you think it does. So there maybe the vulnerable parties that are unwitting accomplices to the DDoS attacks could get some, say, virtual notification of the fact that they were being used sooner than I had kind of presumed based on our conversation last week.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, essentially the flush all flushes all keys and values stored in Memcached. And since Memcached only purpose in life is to cache values and return them very, very fast instead of having to go back to the database, having everything flushed can cause, a significant fraction of your traffic to actually hit your backend database.
So you get a different kind of DDoS attack.
Yeah. And they called this one. So the other one was mem crash. So this was mem fixed. All right. So that was my little bit of follow up. So the Memcached continues. And I guess so long as there are so many open servers and it is such a high multiple for input to output, it will probably remain with us for some time. We'll kind of keep our eye on that. So with Carl here, and a fairly meaty topic, maybe we don't have to dwell on our others, but I do think that we've got a couple of other interesting things to hit. You want to go, Eric?
Oh, sure. So I guess mine is very short. With Ethereum and the Ethereum blockchain, there are bugs with smart contracts that do unexpected behaviors on unexpected inputs, and people lose millions of dollars. Trail of Bits has a security company has embraced blockchain and looking at smart contracts, and they released Echidna. However, I'm pronouncing that totally wrong. It's the next generation EVM for Ethereum virtual machine smart fuzzer. So it's the ability to do some testing against your smart contracts.
Echidna was from Greek mythology, mother of monsters? Or is that, am I, now I gotta Google that.
Echidna.
Oh, no, because I'm
wrong.
Like an echidna is a spiny, insectivorous, egg-laying mammal with a long snout and claws native to Australia and New Guinea.
I was going to say it's some kind of animal.
All right.
Wait.
So,
No.
anyways,
Echidna was a monster, half woman, half snake, who lived alone in a cave. She was the mate of the fearsome monster Typhon, and known primarily for being the mother of monsters, including many of the most famous monsters of Greek myth. All right, see, go ahead, as you were.
That's the quietest "I told you so" I've ever heard.
I only know that because my sons read Percy Jackson so many times, and I read them out loud to them when they were younger. So it's not like I remember Greek mythology from college or anything like that. It is pop mythology.
All right. So, anyways, what it does is it's a tool to allow you to test your smart contracts and look for edge cases, and it works on the actual bytecode. So I guess the short answer here is it's kind of cool to see security companies stepping up and building tools for blockchain, or Ethereum blockchain specifically. I think it is one of the trailing indicators of the maturity of blockchain as a technology and blockchain as something, a development environment to build on top of.
I can't help but try and clarify a little bit of stuff there, because I'm not sure, depending on who's listening, that might not make entire sense. But essentially, with Ethereum, since it is a distributed ledger or distributed application framework, all of the smart contracts exist on all of the nodes. So if you are running an Ethereum node, you can see all the smart contracts, which means that you can kind of poke at them and do static analysis on them without actually executing transactions against them. So you can build tools like this that scan through your copy of the blockchain, find contracts, and then execute well-known attacks, or known attacks against them, or other forms of static analysis, covariety type analysis on the, I forget the language, Solidity?
Yeah, Solidity. Yep. So hey, if you want to test your smart contract before you launch and start acquiring millions of dollars and then only to lose it all because of a buffer overflow, here's a tool to help you poke at that.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, so let's do mine relatively quickly too, and then we'll switch over to Carl for the big topic for tonight. So the thing that most piqued my interest this week was an article that was posted by Citizen Lab, which was about unsecured traffic injection of malware by ISPs to targeted groups in a couple of countries, specifically Turkey and Egypt. Basically, if you were one of the groups targeted and you went to go download a legitimate tool, even if you were, on the legitimate tool's website, oftentimes when they point you to download the tool itself, the download itself came over HTTP, not HTTPS. And if so, then the ISP was able to basically man in the middle of that and return you the same tool that you downloaded, but with malware injected. And this was the interesting. I mean, I think that I don't know what to say about the types of regimes and things like that would do this, but one of the things about this particular article was they did a work to sort of reverse engineer and identify the devices that were likely used to do this, and these were devices from a company called Packet Logic that. Or I think Sandvine now bought them, but the deep packet inspection devices, and then the way that the devices did redirects HTTP redirects in some cases was they were able to basically pinpoint, and this is quite a long article, but they basically were able to pinpoint that, using secondhand devices, because you can't just go into a store and buy one of these devices, but they picked up a device secondhand, running old software because the device, newer software wasn't supported. One of the reasons why we should encrypt all the things, HTTPS all the way, everywhere.
Well, you're not kidding. This article's long. I'm scrolling through it, and when you have chapter headings and are up to 5.5.
I have to be frank. I don't think I read every section of this because as you say, it was very long, and I sometimes am run out of rooms. But for example, 3.2 is where they were, sort of trying to identify countries that were, catching the redirect or triggering redirects only when the request was coming from certain countries, for example. This was the article that most piqued my interest, and so, there's no reason in today's day and age to not have HTTPS everywhere. Let's Encrypt is awesome. Let's Encrypt works. Encrypt.
Cool.
All right. Well, hey, we'll put this link in there, and it's worth a read.
So,
all right,
the big reveal, the good stuff, the reason why Carl's here.
So, hey, Carl.
AMD, yeah.
What happened this week?
So it's pretty interesting, very, very new still, but a research company, CTS, has produced a paper that reveals 1213 exploits in AMD processors. It's the EPIC, I believe you pronounce it, and then the Ryzen Pro, and also Ryzen Mobile. Now, at the moment, it's, to all intents and purposes, theoretical. There aren't any exploits. They've removed the code from the paper. There's been a lot of noise generated because they've released the disclosure giving AMD apparently only 24 hours notice. So it's actually had quite a serious impact on AMD's stock price.
Very irresponsible disclosure.
I would say so. I'm really not a fan of what they did, and particularly given that there is not that much information in the paper itself in order to establish whether or not this is a really, really serious problem or not. But if you compare it to Meltdown and Spectre, there's some interesting differences. So the first thing is...
Hey, so before you go into that, though, Carl, I wanted to point out one thing in the paper that I thought was maddening almost is... at the end, I don't know did you read the important legal disclaimer at the end of their paper? I
didn't read the legal stuff, no.
Although we have, I'm quoting here, although we have a good faith belief in our analysis and believe it to be objective and unbiased, you're advised that we may have, either directly or indirectly, an economic interest in the performance of the securities of the companies whose products are the subject of our reports.
Wow. Okay.
So, i.e., this is a business model, right? So there are business models that are, I don't know if this could be even considered slightly above the white line. Ransomware, definitely black. This seems like extortionware almost, or they're not trying to extort money, but did they discover these things, which appear to be valid vulnerabilities. I mean, they seem to have been confirmed by a number of other sort of independent people that have been given POC code. But we find these vulnerabilities, we short the stock, we release it, we, profit.
Yeah, so it seems that some of the tinfoil hat threads I was looking at on Reddit might be accurate there.
I haven't read any of the tinfoil hat threads, but it definitely looks, regardless, that gets into the motivation and the mechanics of it, and how it was done was awful, but regardless, the vulnerabilities do seem to be, from what we can tell at this point, legit.
Yeah, and they're pretty interesting and relatively scary from some angles. So the thing that's really scary for me is it's one word: persistence. Right, this is the kind of persistence that if you're a nation state, you'd be drooling over this. persistence at ring -2, that's just absolutely amazing. But then by the same token, unlike Meltdown and Spectre, as far as I can tell, all of the exploits you need to be admin, whereas Meltdown, for example, you could read kernel memory running as guest. So is it going to be worse than Meltdown Spectre? Don't really know yet. It really does depend. The other thing that's interesting about this is some of the exploits stem from making use of AMD's device driver. And so it's possible a lot of these could be fixed with software. So we're still waiting, obviously, for AMD to make a statement, but it'll be really interesting to see what they say.
Yeah, I guess I expect AMD to make a statement sometime in the next 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah,
other than the non-statement statement they made, which basically said, "Hey, we just got this. We're looking at it."
So I'll get into the 4 different exploits themselves. So the first one is master key, right? And this one allows you to execute code on AMD's secure processor. This is a processing unit. Off to the side, it's an A5 chip. And the actual exploit itself you would install by updating the BIOS, and that BIOS image would have metadata that then contains the actual exploit itself. Now, the worst thing about this particular exploit is that most AMD systems apparently are shipping with an American Megatrends BIOS, which can be updated using a command line tool. So you just need admin, and you could take advantage of this and gain the persistence that we've been talking about. Now, if you have a different BIOS to that, then there's still an opportunity using some of the later exploits, Rise and Fall and Fallout, to gain enough access for you to be able to update the BIOS. So it does seem it's possible you could cover all processors with this. It's persistent and very, very difficult to detect. And what this one allows you to do is it basically allows you to insert yourself into root of trust, and you can effectively remove any secure boot guarantee, which is huge. It really is. Now, moving on from that, moving up into the area that we typically live in, this causes a really big problem for Microsoft, because if you're running a ring -2, you're basically underneath virtualization-based security, VBS, which means that Credential Guard is no longer going to protect you. So all of your standard Mimikatz-like attacks should be possible again. Just like we showed at I think it was Focus 15, was it? Where we showed ATR's attack where they were able to bypass Credential Guard. Was it Focus 15?
Sorry, I don't remember.
Yeah, anyway, so we definitely be able to do that again. And so that's really, really scary stuff. Now, Rise and Fall is the second exploit. Now, this is a vulnerability in the secure OS that runs on the secure processor itself. And again, you need local admin to gain access. Now, it's not present on the Epic, so it's not an issue for servers. That's the Fallout class of exploits, which comes later. And like I said before, using a vendor-delivered device driver in order to gain execution in that environment. Now, once you've done that, you have pretty much the same possibilities as master key, and you're effectively unlimited. You're running in system management mode, really, or at that level of privilege. So you can disable secure boot, you can run code in SMM, you can allow the BIOS to be flashed, all that kind of stuff. And on top of that, you still have all of your attacks where you can bypass VBS, you can read from different isolated user mode regions and isolated kernel mode regions, all of that kind of stuff. So you're basically able to do pretty much whatever you want on the box.
But now, doesn't it require a signed software update in order to update the BIOS and or the firmware?
Yes, it does. So to update the BIOS, so that's why I was talking before about American Megatrends and the fact they have a utility to update the BIOS. Now, in that case, it's there is a way for you can. I don't exactly know how this bit works. They don't go into detail, but they are saying that you can install a BIOS update that is not signed using this command line tool. Now, for other versions of AMD platforms, you would have to have a signed BIOS, which is why you'd have to fall back to using Rise and Fall or Fallout to be able to get SMM level privileges to then disable BIOS protection, and then you can flash the BIOS yourself.
Okay.
So So master key is one of the more interesting ones, but actually for some of the platforms you need Rise and Fall or Fallout. Now, so we've covered Rise and Fall. Now, Fallout is pretty much the same, but this is for the Epic chips. And again, you need admin access, and again, you're using AMD's device driver to be able to get your code running in that secure environment. Once you've done that, you have exactly the same privileges that you had with Rise and Fall, just on a different platform. So very, very, very similar. So the last one, and this is the one that's easily the most interesting and definitely the most bizarre to me, is Chimera. Now, in AMD's defense, it doesn't look like there is much to do with AMD in this particular attack. It turns out that the part of the chipset that ships on these platforms is actually managed, maintained, written, produced by Asus Tech or AS Media. Now, they have a reputation at the moment of being very slow to address security vulnerabilities and so forth, but it turns out that let me just read this so I can get this right. What's the name of this chip? The Promontory chip, I believe it's called. This has 2 backdoors put into it by the manufacturer, apparently. One in software, which could be, and this is firmware, so this could be mitigated by updating that. And then one in hardware in the ASIC hardware. Now, that one is particularly scary. No details on how you would actually get your code running in there, but this is really, really, really worrying. So from when you have your code running in that location, you've then got access to SATA, USB, Wi-Fi, PCIe, etc. And so you can do all kinds of really interesting exploits there. One of the things you can do, and I think this is awesome, imagine you've got access to USB devices, and you can see the URBs coming by you. Instant keyboard lock. That's super cool, right? And how are you going to spot that? There is no filtering mechanism in the platform at all that anyone could use to try and determine that there is something interesting happening in the stack there. So that's really interesting.
You'd have to catch exfiltration, but even that they can if they have access to the LAN and Wi-Fi. Can they initiate connections at that level? I guess
they can indeed. That is my second fun exploit. You can now use those network devices for a complete out of band communication mechanism, a bit like AMT.
Interesting.
So now you've got this ability for you to be able to look at things that are happening at the hardware level and then use hardware directly to then exfiltrate that data. That's super scary. And so if I was a nation state, I would be an attack part for nation state. I would be super, super happy with this discovery. This is really, really quite cool. And of course, another exploit is you have the ability to be able to, you can run in SMM mode again. So you have once you have yourself running in this environment, you can then get straight into Fallout, Rise and Fall, and Master Key type exploits. The other thing that you can do is you can use, and they've done this already, you can use DMA to either override or otherwise manipulate or just inspect the operating system as it's running. So to all intents and purposes, you're able to do pretty much whatever you want when you're using Chimera. And that's the really scary thing for me about this one, is that there really aren't enough details to know whether or not this is an easy exploit or what. So we really do have to wait for more details to come out. But that one is terrifying to me, Chimera.
Yeah.
That's really, really scary.
How powerful is that coprocessor?
I don't know. All I know is that it's an A5 chip, so it's definitely got some horsepower, but I don't know how powerful it is.
Interesting. I guess the other thing that I read, I don't think it was in the paper itself. Actually, I didn't finish reading the paper, but I read a Wired article. I think it was in Wired that mentioned, I guess if you have the ability to update the BIOS and overwrite firmware, you could do so to brick it to intentionally harm.
Yeah, absolutely. You could. It's a potential ransomware avenue. And there is nothing about this that is not scary, really. To be honest.
So dumb guy question here. So is it essentially also putting you below a rootkit, or is it similar to a rootkit?
It would be the lowest rootkit that I've seen or been aware of.
Okay.
So you wouldn't be. Most of the rootkits I've come across have all been kernel based.
Right.
And so this is a long way below that. So it's beneath ring -1 even. So yeah, you can do pretty much anything at this point. I think the only thing that this would struggle gaining access to is encrypted data at rest. That's basically it. If data is in use, then you can steal it. You have unrestricted access to pretty much every feature of the operating system and the hardware. So this is a really scary one. It really is.
I have to say that when this first broke, I think it was 2 days ago, or was it just yesterday? I saw a tweet by Mickey that had a link to a talk that he and Jesse gave in 2015 about As Media coprocessor, and as I guess I watched that before I had read any of the paper here, but it would be interesting to go back and watch that again now that we know a little bit more and see if were they leveraging the exact same exploit.
I haven't seen that. I'll definitely have to check it.
We'll get a link into the show notes here, but Mickey and Jesse had a.
Sorry, I was distracted by the cat.
I know. I'm trying to leave her alone.
So I think the really interesting thing for me, I hinted at it before about this, is I can see why people are really, really scared by this. I mean, I am as well. But at least from what I've seen in the paper, the cool thing is that most of these exploits seem to have mitigations apart from hardware chimera. So master key, you can, well, not easily, but relatively easy. You could start looking for BIOS uploads or BIOS images that are unknown,
right?
Or that kind of thing. And then if AMD were to, and they are able to fix the rise and fall and the fallout issues by updating the driver, then that would prevent the second avenue of updating the BIOS. There's that. And you would also mitigate both of the rise and fall and fallout exploits. So all of those would be gone. You can fix, apparently, it looks like you could fix the firmware issue for Chimera with an update, and you're just left now with the ASIC issue. So depending on how easy it is to exploit that, it looks like that could end up being if it's as dangerous as it seems it is, then that could be a recall. There's no way to actually fix that.
Yeah, interesting. All right, well, kind of a late breaking story this week, so we'll have to kind of keep our ear to the ground. I'm sure that we'll know more about this next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess, yeah, one bright spot is that they clearly have only given the actual exploit code to a few select individuals. I guess it's better than posting it on GitHub. And if there's exploit code on GitHub yet, I haven't seen links to it yet.
I'm sure it's coming.
Oh, it's coming. You know that.
Yeah.
Well, on that note.
All right, gentlemen. Yeah. Got something fun for me tonight?
Carl, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So last time I was talking about my mini love affair with Alexa. And this is continued. So last week I bought this really cool ornamental candle. It's a big piece of slate, and it had 4 holes drilled in it, and you basically have wicks coming through it. It's meant to be a nice looking candle. Now, when I was using this, bit of a problem in that the candle seemed to have 2 modes. It was either giant flames and smoke coming off that you could see from space, or little tiny flames that were just basically invisible to the naked eye. So I thought, well, hang on, I use Alexa all the time for things like, Alexa, downstairs, lights red, or something like that. And wouldn't it be cool if I could just take a couple of LEDs, put them in place of these little candles, and then get myself an Arduino, and then build an Alexa skill that would allow me to, everything would work together, and I have a nice little candle that changed light with the rest of my lights downstairs. So that's going to be my fun project for next week or two. I'm super excited because it's so far removed from what I normally do. It's going to be awesome. and I'm wondering how many really silly security mistakes I can make just going through. There'd be an interesting exercise, because we're always talking about how people who don't know what they're doing, it's not their area, what kind of security mistakes they make. I'm supposed to be a security expert. I wonder how I'm going to fare. So I will let you know next time I come back on the podcast.
Eric, you've created a monster.
Yeah.
This is awesome. All right. Well, that's a good one. I'm looking forward to pictures. And,
pictures.
an IP address that I can try to hack.
That's right. All right, I'll go next. Mine's just a really small one. To be honest, this week, something fun. I enjoyed. Let's see, who was the guy that posted this? I think it might have been Scott Hanselman. But my something cool was 2 photographers unknowingly shot a wave off the coast of Maine during one of the nor'easters at essentially the same millisecond. And so, it's basically a story of 2 photographers bundled up in gear with, very nice cameras, pointing at a lighthouse that is famous for having huge waves crashing against it. They both are professional photographers, and not long after had posted something and basically thought that each one thought that they had been plagiarized or had copyright violation. But through a little bit of sleuthing and the fact that they both had raw files, and the fact that they zoomed in on some of the metal bars in kind of the guardrails at the top of the lighthouse, they could see that even though the wave seems to be at the exact same second or sub-second, there's a little bit less parallax in one than the other. And so they effectively were, 80 feet apart, or, some number of feet apart back where they were doing it. And they exchanged, and, anyway, so my something fun is this post that was, basically how 2 professional photographers unknowingly shot the same millisecond in time. Yeah, the pictures are amazing. I thought that was cool. Yeah, the pictures being so cool didn't hurt with the ooh wow, that's a nice story. All right, so mine. What's today, John? Duh, why didn't we talk about that at the beginning? That would be Pi Day. Pi Day, that is right. Yes. So are you aware of the website numberphile.com? Phile.com? I am not. You are going to go stare at this website now. I must say that for Pi Day, we did have chicken pot pie for dinner. And well I did stop at Sherry's on my way home and buy a lemon meringue pie was the request. So I had pie squared. So, I'm good. So numberphile.com, they do videos around mathematics and numbers and physics, and they do mathematical proofs or interesting things, videos that are interesting things about numbers. And of course, what more interesting number is there than pi? So they calculated pi out to 1 million digits, and then they printed it off on a big roll of paper, and they rolled it out on an airplane runway, and it's a little over a mile long with, the font they printed with. And then during this video, which we'll post, you can go to Numberphile, and they tons of videos, which are, you can get, it's a rabbit hole. You can get lost in. I can already tell this is going to suck some time for me. Thank you. Yes. You're welcome. Anyways, they show interesting parts of, at this point, pi is this, and there's the point in pi that's called the Feynman number, where there's 4 nines in a row or 5 nines in a row, and it's they do it by how many yards out. This is 120 yards out, and at 600 yards out is 67,000 digits, and that's the longest length that anyone has memorized pi to. And then at I think half a mile out, you've got the first point where there are 7 consecutive increasing digits in a row. So they just kind of point out interesting things about pi in a mile of pi. Wow. So there's my something fun for Pi Day. And then
tons of fun for other math things.
I'm so glad you brought up Pi Day. How could we not have mentioned Pi Day in the intro? I fail as a geek.
That's all right.
At least I ate my pie.
I had sushi for dinner.
Me too.
Yeah, Carl and I went to sushi. So
Heaven forfend. That's just wrong.
Not a sushi fan?
Well, not on Pi Day.
Or any other day for that matter.
Okay. No, I'm not a sushi fan. All right. Well, that was great. That was great.
That was fun.
Hey, Carl, thanks for joining.
No worries.
And we'll see you next week.
We'll see how it turns out. Thanks, John.
All right. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.